The day my boss fired me, he smiled. My son deserves this job more than you. I packed my desk without saying a word. 1 year later, I walked back into the same building, not as an employee, but as the new owner. My former boss looked at me and whispered, "Please, don't fire me." Have you ever sat at a family dinner and realized every smile around the table was fake? I did. The night my father died, my brother raised a glass and called me the family's biggest failure. Everyone laughed. My sister whispered that I had spent my whole life cleaning floors because I wasn't smart enough to do anything else. Even my aunt looked at me with pity. None of them knew the truth. They thought I was just a broke janitor who barely survived paycheck to paycheck. They had no idea I'd spent the last 6 years secretly taking care of our father while they fought over the fortune they believed was already theirs. They mocked my old pickup truck. They laughed at my secondhand clothes. They even argued about who would let me sleep in their garage after the funeral because they assumed I'd soon be homeless. What happened 48 hours later destroyed every lie they'd built their lives on. Because when the lawyer opened my father's final will, every face in that room turned white, and for the first time in my life, they needed me far more than I would ever need them. I'm Ethan, 68 years old, and this is the story of how my own family tried to erase me, only to discover that kindness is sometimes worth far more than millions of dollars. For the first few weeks, Daniel was just another familiar face at the hospital. Every Tuesday and Thursday, he visited his 8-year-old nephew, Mason. Unlike most visitors, he never rushed through the room. He played board games, helped the nurses, even stayed behind to clean up after everyone left. One afternoon, I jokingly asked, "Do you secretly work here?" He laughed. "No, but hospitals have a way of reminding you what really matters." That answer stayed with me. We started talking during my lunch breaks, then after my shifts, then over coffee. Unlike Ryan, Daniel never interrupted me. He listened, really listened. When I talked about difficult days at the hospital, he asked how I was feeling, not how much overtime I was making. When I mentioned my dream of opening a children's health foundation one day, he didn't laugh. He asked, "How can I help make that happen?" It was such a simple question, but nobody had ever asked me that before. 3 months later, he finally asked me to dinner. "I know this isn't exactly romantic," he smiled, "but the best taco truck in Seattle closes in 20 minutes. I laughed. "Lead the way." That night cost less than $40. It became one of my favorite memories, because happiness isn't measured by the restaurant. It's measured by the person sitting across from you. Over the next year, Daniel became my best friend, then my partner, then the safest place I'd ever known. He never tried to impress me. He never bragged. Whenever I asked about work, he'd simply smile. I run a small software company. That was IT.no. Fancy titles. No expensive stories, just quiet confidence. One evening we were walking along the waterfront when my phone buzzed. A message from an old college friend. "Did you hear? Ryan's wife is hosting the biggest charity gala in the city next month." I'd smile every time. My life didn't stop, Dad. I'm exactly where I want to be. One cold November evening, he grabbed my hand tighter than usual. "Ethan." "Yeah?" "Promise me something. Anything. When I'm gone, don't let bitterness become your inheritance." I laughed softly. "I don't hate them." He looked at me with tired eyes. "I know." Then he smiled. "That's why you're the richest person in this family." At the time, I thought he meant my heart. I had no idea he meant something else entirely. The morning my father passed away, the farmhouse was silent. For 6 years, every day had started the same way. I'd make coffee, check his medication, help him to the porch, and we'd watch the sunrise together. That morning, there was only an empty chair. The funeral was held 3 days later. I stood quietly beside Dad's casket, greeting the people who had actually known him, old neighbors, former coworkers, veterans he had served with decades ago. They all hugged me. "I don't know what your father would have done without you, Ethan. You gave him 6 beautiful years. You're a good son." Those words meant more than they could ever imagine. Then my family arrived. Daniel stepped out of a brand new black Mercedes wearing a designer suit that probably cost more than my monthly paycheck. Rebecca arrived moments later. Carrying an expensive handbag and sunglasses, even though the sky was gray, the first thing Daniel asked wasn't about DAD.IT, wasn't about the funeral.IT, wasn't even about me. So, when does the lawyer read the will? I stared at him. Our father isn't even buried yet. He shrugged. I'm just asking. Rebecca leaned closer and whispered with a laugh. I hope Dad finally sold this old dump before he died. I looked back at the farmhouse. The porch swing Dad loved, the apple tree Mom planted 40 years ago. The garden we'd worked on together every spring.to them. It was just property.to me. It was home. After the service, everyone gathered in the church hall. People shared stories about Dad, his kindness, his humor, the way he helped strangers without expecting anything in return. Daniel barely listened. Instead, he walked around asking distant relatives if they knew how much the farm was worth. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Then came the moment I'll never forget. One of Dad's old army friends walked over to me. He placed a weathered hand on my shoulder. Your father told me you never left his side. I just did what any son should. The old man smiled. No. Someone else helped him. I froze. Who? My lawyer took a deep breath. You won't believe this. It's someone still working inside your company. He shook his head. You did what his children should have done. Daniel overheard every word. He laughed loudly enough for half the room to hear. Oh, come on. Ethan lived here because he couldn't afford rent anywhere else. A few uncomfortable chuckles echoed across the room. My face burned. It wasn't true. I'd given up my apartment because Dad needed someone, but before I could speak, Rebecca joined in. Honestly, Ethan has always been good at one thing. People looked at her. Cleaning. She smiled. I guess changing diapers for old people wasn't much of a career upgrade. This time, nobody laughed. The room became painfully quiet. Even strangers looked embarrassed. I wanted to walk away instead. I remembered Dad's last words. Don't let bitterness become your inheritance. I simply picked up a stack of empty coffee cups and carried them to the trash. Daniel smirked. See? He just can't stop cleaning. More laughter. I said nothing because dignity doesn't always answer insults, sometimes. It simply waits. That evening, after everyone had left, I returned to the farmhouse alone. The house felt empty. Dad's reading glasses were still on the kitchen table. His favorite sweater still hung beside the door. I sat on the porch until sunset. Then I noticed something unusual. An envelope had been tucked beneath Dad's old rocking chair. My name was written across the front in his unmistakable handwriting. For Ethan. Open only after the funeral. My hands began to shake. Inside was a short letter. I stared at the picture. Someone else had been involved all along, and they were still out there. My dear son, if you're reading this, I'm finally with your mother. First, thank you. You gave me 6 years that no amount of money could ever buy. The others will soon learn something they never understood, that love cannot be measured in dollars. When Mr. Harrison calls tomorrow morning, go to his office alone. Don't tell Daniel or Rebecca. Everything will make sense then. I'm proud of you. Dad. I read the letter 3 times. Mr. Harrison, Dad's attorney. Why would he want to see me before the official reading of the will? I folded the letter carefully and slipped it into my jacket. For the first time since Dad passed away, I felt that he still had one final lesson left to teach us all, and I had no idea that within 24 hours, my family's entire world would collapse. Closer than we ever were, as if we're both trying to make up for lost time. Clarify what the title means. But here's the truth I've come to understand. My parents didn't lose their son forever, not in the way I once feared. What they lost, what we all lost, were those 3 years. The birthdays I wasn't there for. The ordinary Tuesday dinners we'll never get back. The version of me that could have grown up in that house feeling fully seen, fully accepted, without ever having to leave to become myself. That son, happy, open, unafraid, is the one they lost forever. He doesn't exist anymore, not because I disappeared, but because those years shaped me into someone who had to build his own family from scratch, far away from the one he was born into. Even now, when I visit my parents, there's a quiet awkwardness that sits in the room with us, an unspoken acknowledgement of everything we lost. But I'm grateful, genuinely grateful, that we're talking again. That the silence finally broke. If you're in a situation like this, whether you're the parent or the child, I only want to say this. Love should always be bigger than approval. Bigger than conditions. Because the time we lose to anger and pride never comes back, no matter how much healing happens afterward. CTA, if this story moved you, let me know in the comments. Has something like this ever happened in your life or in your family? And if you connect with these kinds of real, emotional stories, hit subscribe. I share one every single week. I looked out of the window at the city I had once struggled to survive in and quietly replied, this was never about revenge. It was about proving that integrity will always outlast betrayal. Just then, my assistant walked in with a small envelope. Sir, this arrived for you this morning. I opened it and found a single key inside, along with a handwritten note that read, your father wanted you to have this, before he passed away. I stared at the old brass key in my hand, unable to understand why my father had wanted me to have it. The note contained only one address. The next morning, I drove there. It was a small storage unit on the edge of the city. The lock opened with a single click. Inside, there was no money, no luxury cars, and no hidden fortune. There were only old boxes, dusty photo albums, and a wooden desk. On the desk sat a sealed envelope with my name written across the front. My hands trembled as I opened it. If you're reading this, it means I'm no longer here. I wasn't always the father you deserved, but I never stopped believing in you. I knew one day you'd build something greater than I ever could. Success isn't measured by the company you own or the money in your account. It's measured by the lives you change. If you ever become the leader I know you can be, promise me one thing. Never treat people the way life treated you. I slowly folded the letter. For the first time in years, tears filled my eyes. At that moment, I finally understood something. The greatest victory wasn't buying the company. It wasn't proving my former boss wrong. It wasn't watching my enemies lose. It was becoming the kind of leader I had always needed. A few weeks later, I gathered every employee in the company lobby. I stood on the stage and looked around the room. I have one announcement, I said. Starting today, every employee in this company will receive profit sharing, paid training, and equal opportunities to grow. No one will ever lose their future because of favoritism again. The room exploded with applause. Some employees hugged each other. Others couldn't hold back their tears. My former boss stepped forward and smiled. You didn't just save this company, you changed it forever. I smiled back. People gave me a chance when I had nothing. Now it's my turn to give that chance to someone else. As I looked across the office, I realized my journey had never been about revenge. It had always been about resilience. The people who betrayed me had lost their power the moment I stopped letting them define my future. I walked into my office one last time, placed my father's letter inside my desk drawer, and looked out over the city. 1 year earlier, I had walked out of this company carrying nothing but a cardboard box. Today, I walked through the same building knowing that no one could ever take away what I had truly earned. Sometimes the greatest revenge isn't getting even. It's building a life so successful that your past can never catch you again.